With the WNBA season ending for many teams, there are already so many players heading overseas to play during the off-season. But with all of the drama currently surrounding the WNBA, on top of the low-paying salaries, some of these players are questioning if they'll even return.
Buckle up, because Caitlin Clark has just sent shockwaves through the sports world by packing her bags for Europe. And now ESPN and the WNBA are left scrambling in panic mode. How did they let a generational talent slip through their fingers? Why is Clark ditching the WNBA for Europe? And what does this mean for the future of the league? Let's break down how ESPN's incompetence, the WNBA's failure, and Caitlin Clark's ultimate power move have set off a domino effect that could change women's basketball forever. In a jaw-dropping move that no one saw coming, Caitlin Clark has signed a mega contract with a European team, and the WNBA is in full-blown crisis mode.
But you're still complaining about the max salary being $250,000. You're still complaining about the absence of eyeballs. You're still complaining about the lack of headlines and notoriety and pub and cachet. You're complaining about all of these things.
ESPN is reeling, trying to figure out how they fumbled their chance to keep her in the league, and now Clark, one of the brightest stars in women's basketball, is heading overseas. But make no mistake, this isn't just a career move, this is a statement. For months, Caitlin Clark has been the face of the WNBA, the player drawing in record-breaking crowds and carrying a struggling league on her back. Yet despite all of her efforts, the league failed her. Clark has been vocal about the physical toll of playing in the WNBA, saying, "I feel like I'm getting hammered out there."
She's faced at the professional level and voiced frustration with the league's officiating, recently telling reporters, quote, "I feel like I'm getting hammered and everybody is physical with me, and opponents get away with things that other people don't get away with." That's what Caitlin Clark said.
And the officiating has done nothing to protect her. She's been pushed, shoved, elbowed, treated more like a fighter in a boxing ring than a basketball player. Now, after enduring a season of brutality and mistreatment, Clark has had enough, and she's taking her talents to Europe, where she'll be properly valued and respected. ESPN, which treated Clark as just another player during her WNBA stint, is now acting like they've been her biggest cheerleader all along. Suddenly, they're scrambling to cover her exit and pretend they didn't overlook the biggest star women's basketball has seen in decades. For months, ESPN downplayed her achievements, giving her lukewarm coverage while she was out there, breaking records, and turning the WNBA into must-see TV. Now, as Clark heads to Europe, ESPN is scrambling to figure out how they missed the boat. Too little, too late. Clark's decision to leave the WNBA wasn't just about the lack of protection on the court. It was about respect. And ESPN, they failed to give her the platform she deserved when it mattered most. The game she played against the New York Liberty pulled in 1.5 million viewers. More than some NBA games on TNT, but ESPN never treated Clark like the megastar she is. Instead, they're now left trying to salvage the mess they created.
If Caitlin Clark is the quote-unquote savior, if she's the golden girl, milk it!
The WNBA's failure to keep Caitlin Clark is one of the biggest missteps in the league's history. Before Clark, the Indiana Fever was struggling to attract even 3,000 fans per game. But when Clark stepped on the court, everything changed. The Fever's attendance skyrocketed by 400%, pulling in 177,000 fans, making them the league's attendance leader both at home and on the road. Clark was a walking cash cow for the WNBA, and they let her slip away. The league failed to protect their star, ignored the blatant fouls against her, and allowed her to be treated like a punching bag every time she played. Remember the eye poke incident? In her very first WNBA playoff game, Clark was poked in the eye, and yet the referees didn't even stop the game to review it. No foul, no flagrant, just a shrug from the officials as Clark was left to fend for herself.
During the first 2 minutes of the first-round playoff game of the Connecticut Sun versus the Indiana Fever, Dejanay Carrington poked Caitlin Clark in the eye. Caitlin fell to the ground. She was holding her face. The refs did not call a foul. They didn't call a flagrant foul. The play continued. But now a lot of people online are asking for the WNBA to review this play because as multiple angles have come out of this play, it seems like it might have been intentional.
The WNBA could have built an empire around Caitlin Clark, made her the face of the league, and drawn in a new generation of fans.
A lot of this noise came by people that were sitting on this network. They tried to minimize her, said, well, you giving her all this credit. What about the women that came before her? What the women came before her, what they did cannot be taken away. That ain't got nothing to do with Caitlin Clark.
But instead, they let her endure a season of physicality that bordered on abuse. And now they're left scrambling to figure out how they let their brightest star walk away.
It's important that we point this out. One of the things that I brought up this morning in talking about Caitlin Clark is that some of the players, you want to use the word jealousy, fine. You want to use the word envy, fine. You want to use the word resentment. We want to play with words. That's cool.
Let's not forget Clark's final game in the WNBA playoffs, where she put on a one-woman show with 29 points, 10 assists, and 7 rebounds. Meanwhile, her teammates were missing open shots and making boneheaded plays that would make a high school coach cringe. It was clear as day. Clark was the only thing keeping the Indiana Fever alive, but she couldn't carry the team alone. Clark's decision to leave the WNBA wasn't just about the physicality of the game. It was about the lack of support from the league, her team, and even the media. She was their meal ticket, the one player who turned the WNBA into a spectacle worth watching, and they treated her like she was expendable. Now she's off to Europe, where her talent will be appreciated and she won't have to endure the same mistreatment. As if things couldn't get worse, WNBA star Alyssa Thomas threw gasoline on the fire by suggesting that Caitlin Clark's popularity was rooted in racial dynamics rather than her jaw-dropping talent. Thomas's comments sparked controversy, and ESPN, ever eager to stir the pot, ran with the narrative, framing Clark's success through the lens of race rather than focusing on her record-breaking performances.
I think in my 11-year career, I've never experienced the racial comments from the Indiana Fever fan base.
Clark, however, handled it with grace. She stood her ground, making it clear that her success was the result of hard work, dedication, and grit, not some cheap racial storyline. But the fact that she even had to address such baseless accusations shows just how twisted the media's coverage of her has been. Rather than celebrating her incredible accomplishments, the media chose to focus on controversy, further proving why Clark is better off leaving this toxic environment behind. Caitlin Clark's decision to head to Europe is more than just a career move. It's a signal that she's done with the drama, the mistreatment, and the disrespect she faced in the WNBA. In Europe, she'll be playing for a league that values her talent, where she'll be able to play basketball without having to constantly defend herself from dirty fouls and lackluster officiating. As for the WNBA and ESPN, they're left picking up the pieces. The WNBA could have built their entire future around Clark, made her the face of the league, and drawn in millions of new fans. Instead, they let her slip away, and now they're left with a massive void that they'll be hard-pressed to fill. ESPN, too, will feel the sting. Clark brought in juicy ratings, spiked merchandise sales, and turned the WNBA into a must-watch event. Now they're left trying to hype up players who, quite frankly, can't even come close to matching what Clark accomplished in a single season. As Caitlin Clark embarks on her new journey in Europe, ESPN and the WNBA are left scrambling to figure out how they let one of the greatest talents in women's basketball slip through their fingers. Will the WNBA ever recover from this monumental loss? Or is this just the beginning of an even bigger exodus of star players? Can ESPN salvage its reputation after sleeping on the biggest story in women's sports? One thing is for sure, Caitlin Clark is about to shine even brighter overseas, and the WNBA's loss is Europe's gain. Stay tuned, because this story is far from over.
Those people, I've seen Stephen A. Smith talk about it. I've seen Shannon Sharp talk about it. And that's what I just don't understand is they work for ESPN. So why are you hating on a product? It's a business you're in. It's not that they can't.
The sports world is buzzing, and Stephen A. Smith is not holding back after getting publicly called out by WNBA legend Sue Bird. In a heated response, Stephen A. is disgusted, but not just with the criticism. He's taking aim at how Sue Bird and others have handled the explosive impact of Caitlin Clark on the WNBA.
I wasn't gonna bring this up, but I saw it and then I read the article. And to be quite honest with you, I'm disgusted. I'm disgusted with Sue Bird, okay? Sue Bird, Hall of Fame caliber, Sue Bird, WNBA, college basketball. Matter of fact, one of the best people that I've ever met, or one of the best women I've ever met in professional or collegiate sports. I love her. But I didn't appreciate this article that I read, okay, when it came to her talking about yours truly. Because you see, far be it, this is the headline, y'all. Sue Bird calls out ESPN host for, quote, hating on WNBA playoff ratings after Caitlin Clark's exit.
Is this a clash of perspectives, or is there a bigger issue bubbling beneath the surface? Let's dive into the drama, dissect Sue Bird's controversial remarks, and Stephen A.'s fiery response. Sue Bird, a Hall of Fame caliber player, widely respected for her legacy in both collegiate and professional basketball, recently sparked a media firestorm after calling out Stephen A. Smith and Shannon Sharpe for their comments on Caitlin Clark in the WNBA playoff ratings.
These numbers are still really high and they're still really meaningful, and they still show and tell a story of the viewership that is being gained in the WNBA. And yet some people continue to flip that. Those people, I've seen Stephen A. Smith talk about it. I've seen Shannon Sharpe talk about it. And that's what I just don't understand is they work for ESPN. So why are you hating on a product? It's a business you're in. It's not that they can't. And by the way, it's not that they can't be critical of certain things. They can have their opinions. But that's where I don't understand the framing of that.
Bird's frustration? That Stephen A. and Shannon dared to point out that the league's viewership skyrocketed because of Clark, insinuating that her absence would lead to a drop in interest.
And you open up your Yahoo, you're going to see WNBA playoff viewership down now that Caitlin is out. And is that somewhat factually accurate? Yes. It's not accurate. Viewership numbers with Caitlin Clark are astronomical. She is a big draw.
Yeah.
She brings in all the things. We know this, we've said this. And yes, the games where she's not playing have lower viewership. But in the WNBA playoffs, and we'll use the semifinals as the example, the WNBA playoff semifinal games where Caitlin obviously is not in it because her team lost, are still breaking records from previous WNBA years, are still cracking 1 million viewers.
Sue Bird's take was clear. Caitlin Clark is phenomenal, but the WNBA's semifinals were still breaking records even without her, cracking 1 million viewers. Bird questioned why Stephen A. and Shannon would hate on a league that ESPN, their employer, has a vested interest in.
Those people, I've seen Stephen A. Smith talk about it. I've seen Shannon Sharpe talk about it. And that's what I just don't understand is they work for ESPN. So why are you hating on a product? It's a business you're in. It's not that they can't. And by the way, it's not that they can't be critical of certain things. They can have their opinions.
On the surface, Bird's comments seem straightforward. Defend the league, promote the growth. But beneath that, Stephen A. saw a serious issue. Stephen A. Smith, never one to shy away from controversy, was livid, and not just because his name was dragged into the conversation. Stephen A. made it clear this wasn't about hating on the WNBA or minimizing the accomplishments of players outside of Caitlin Clark.
Respectfully, Sue Bird, you are inaccurate. It is just that simple. First things first. We cover sports, right? Don't we cover sports? Looking at one of my producers, Sherry, do we cover sports? Do we cover sports? Aaron, do we cover sports? Griff, do we cover sports? I think we cover sports. So if somebody got arrested, I can't bring that up. Go outside the world of sports. The pop and entertainment world, they ain't talking about P. Diddy. The Hollywood Reporter ain't talking about him. TMZ ain't talking about him. Entertainment Tonight ain't talking about him. CNN ain't talking about him. CNBC ain't talking about him. What are you talking about? The story is the story, Sue Bird. What was Stephen A. Smith and Shannon guilty of exactly?
His point, one that he argues Sue Bird missed entirely, was that Caitlin Clark's influence on the league is undeniable, and it needs to be recognized and capitalized on, not brushed aside. As Stephen A. said, a rising tide lifts all boats.
What Shannon Sharpe and I were guilty of saying was that not enough folks were appreciating it and riding the tide. A rising tide lifts all boats.
Caitlin Clark didn't just help the WNBA, she transformed it. The Indiana Fever, Clark's team, led the league in attendance, boosting crowds both at home and on the road. 4 teams moved games to larger arenas just to accommodate more fans when Clark was in town. This isn't just a star player, this is a phenomenon. And to ignore that is to miss the opportunity to propel the league forward in ways it has never seen before.
What was Shannon and I saying? We were saying, do y'all see these numbers? Thanks to Caitlin Clark, Indiana led the league in attendance both at home and on the road. The Indiana Fever, nobody cared about her, averaged 17,035 at home this season with Caitlin Clark and over 15,000 in arenas on the road. 4 teams, moved home games to bigger arenas when Indiana came to town to accommodate more fans. I'm not finished. Attendance for the entire league is up nearly 50% this year, according to data from across the timeline. And Indiana leads all teams with an average attendance of 17,035, up 319% from a year ago. All other teams still grew by double-digit percentages, but not like that. And then we said merchandise sales are also up 450% for the WNBA, according to Fanatics, and Clark was the top-selling player and is 5th amongst athletes across all sports. Fanatics also reported a 100% increase in sales for WNBA-specific merchandise. What's the problem, Sue Bird?
Clark's impact is not just in attendance, but also in merchandise sales and overall viewership. Fanatics reported a 450% increase in WNBA-specific merchandise sales, with Clark's jersey outselling every other player in the league, including legends like Sue Bird herself, Diana Taurasi, and Candace Parker. This was a rookie making waves in ways the league had never experienced before. Stephen A. emphasizes that this isn't about undermining the accomplishments of other players, but recognizing how Clark's arrival has revitalized the WNBA. When Michael Jordan came along, Magic Johnson and Larry Bird didn't complain about his shine, Stephen A. argued. Instead, they recognized that Jordan's presence elevated the entire NBA, turning it into the global phenomenon it is today.
But you know something? Magic Johnson did great things for the NBA. Larry Bird did great things for the NBA. But when that brother Michael Jordan came along, they stood down. Not on the basketball court competing against him, but nobody complained about the shine he received. One reason was because they knew he deserved it. You know what the other reason was? It built the profile of the NBA and made the ratings blow up and took it off a tape delay and put it on primetime television and ultimately assisted in it becoming an international globalized brand. That's what happened.
The WNBA has the chance to do the same, and Caitlin Clark is that player who can lead the charge. For Stephen A., the bigger issue isn't just the call-out itself, but what it represents. Why are some figures in the WNBA seemingly downplaying the massive impact that Clark has had? Sue Bird's comments seem to dismiss the notion that Clark is the league's biggest draw, suggesting that the semifinal viewership numbers were still high without her. But for Stephen A., that's missing the point. Clark generated that interest. Her influence brought new viewers to the WNBA, viewers who may have stayed to watch even after her team was eliminated. It's not just about the games without her, it's about the buzz she created. Stephen A. didn't mince words. Sube, you're wrong on this one. You're missing the bigger picture. For him, it's not about ESPN. It's not about network loyalty. It's about facts. And the fact is, Caitlin Clark is a once-in-a-generation player who deserves to be recognized for what she's done, not just for the Indiana Fever, but for the entire WNBA. Stephen A. wasn't alone in his defense of Caitlin Clark. Shannon Sharpe who was also mentioned in Sue Bird's comments, echoed similar sentiments. Both men have been vocal in their support of Clark, acknowledging her as a game changer for the WNBA. Shannon pointed out that it's not just about the numbers or the ratings, it's about the cultural shift Clark has triggered. Fans who previously paid little attention to the WNBA are now invested. And much of that is because of the excitement and energy Clark brings to the court. While Sue Bird's comments may have been aimed at defending the league as a whole, Stephen A. couldn't help but wonder, is there more to this than meets the eye? Could there be some underlying tension within the WNBA about how much attention Clark has garnered in such a short time? Stephen A. pointed out how, when Michael Jordan rose to prominence, the other greats of the time stepped back, recognizing that his presence benefited everyone. Is Sue Bird and perhaps others in the WNBA reluctant to fully embrace the same idea with Caitlin Clark? It's a provocative question, but Stephen A. isn't shying away from it. He respects Sue Bird, admires her contributions to the game, but firmly believes she's wrong on this one. A rising tide lifts all boats, he reiterated.
But the fact of the matter is, she swelled the interest in the sport. That made people stick around and want to watch the others. A rising tide lifts all boats, which is what we were saying, both Shannon Sharpe and myself, when we addressed that issue. Why would you say a quote like that? We work for ESPN, so I'm supposed to turn a blind eye and a deaf ear to the facts? That ain't what we do.
Making it clear that Caitlin Clark's success is an opportunity for everyone in the WNBA to benefit, not something to be minimized. Stephen A. left viewers with a lingering question. Will the WNBA capitalize on Caitlin Clark's impact, or will they let internal disagreements and short-sightedness hold them back? If the league can embrace Clark's rise, leverage her popularity, and build a broader fan base, they have the chance to take the WNBA to new heights. But if they continue to downplay or misinterpret the significance of her influence, they risk losing a golden opportunity. This debate is far from over. Will Sue Bird and other WNBA figures recognize the full extent of Caitlin Clark's impact? Will Stephen A. and Shannon Sharpe continue to defend their stance, or will Sue Bird respond? One thing is clear, Caitlin Clark has already changed the game, and the future of the WNBA hangs in the balance. Stay tuned, because this conversation is just heating up.